There is a man in an undisclosed location in Tehran, possibly a hospital room, possibly a fortified command bunker, possibly both at different points across the last 14 days, who has never appeared on camera, whose voice has never been broadcast, whose face has not been photographed since the war that killed his father began 15 days ago. And on Thursday, March 12th, that invisible man issued his first public order, not through a press conference, not through a live address, not through video or audio or any verifiable proof of life, through a news anchor, reading words from a piece of paper, on Iranian state television, with an old photograph frozen on the screen beside her. And the words that anchor read to 85 million Iranians and to the entire watching world contained a threat that no Western government, no Pentagon analyst, and no energy market has yet fully priced. Because buried inside the careful diplomatic language of that statement, between the vows of revenge and the calls for Gulf Arab nations to close American bases, was a single sentence that was not about the Strait of Hormuz. It was not about Iran. It was not about oil. It was about something else entirely, something that the United States has not deployed a carrier fleet to a contested waterway to confront since World War II. And if you are watching this on Sunday, March 15, 2026, what that sentence means for the USS Gerald R. Ford and the USS Abraham Lincoln, two aircraft carriers whose combined strike groups represent approximately $39 billion of American naval power currently positioned in the Red Sea and the Eastern Mediterranean, is what this entire script is about. Stay with me for the next 20 minutes, because I am going to show you three things. I am going to show you what Mojtaba Khamenei's statement actually said in its most dangerous sentence, and why almost no Western media outlet reported that sentence in full context. I am going to show you the specific military geometry of the Red Sea right now, where the carriers are, what threatens them, and why retired Rear Admiral John Kirby's statement on Morning Joe on Thursday may be the most chilling 12 words spoken by any American official since the war began. And then I am going to show you the single question that Iran's statement implicitly raises, the question that every defense analyst in Washington is currently asking in private, about whether the most expensive, most powerful, most symbolically important naval assets the United States possesses are now in a position that Iran has studied, has wargamed, and has specifically designed a response for. After all this, you tell me whether the words 12-hour ultimatum are dramatic. I think you'll find they're understated. Start with what we know about Thursday's statement, because the headline every news organization ran, Mojtaba Khamenei says Strait of Hormuz must remain closed, is true, but it is the least important truth in that document. Yes, the new Supreme Leader's statement, read aloud by an anchor on state television with his old photograph on screen beside her, confirmed that the Strait of Hormuz closure must continue as and I quote the CBS News translation, lever. A lever. Not a wall, not a permanent blockade, not an act of permanent war. A lever. That word is doing enormous work. A lever is something you hold on to and use for pressure. A lever has a release condition. The release condition embedded inside the statement was, stop bombing Iran. That framing has been consistent from every senior Iranian official since day 3 of this war. The strait closure is not a declaration of eternal war with global shipping. It is a pressure instrument whose stated purpose is to generate economic pain sufficient to make the United States stop bombing Iran. That is a negotiating framework, not a war aim. And the fact that Mojtaba's first public statement used that specific word, lever, rather than the word blockade or closure, is a diplomatic signal to every country in the world that has approached Tehran asking it to reopen the strait. Turkey approached Tehran. Egypt approached Tehran. India and Pakistan approached Tehran. Lebanon's Al-Akhbar newspaper, which is associated with Hezbollah, reported their response. Security will be for everyone or for no one. Not, no, we will never reopen it. For everyone or for no one. That is a conditional offer. The condition is on the table. It has been on the table since March 3rd. The United States has not picked it up. But the sentence in that statement that every major Western outlet either buried in paragraph 17 or did not report at all is the one that connects directly to the Red Sea, to the carriers, to the $39 billion of naval power that is currently positioned within range of Iran's most advanced anti-ship weapons. Here is what Mojtaba Khamenei's attributed statement said, in full, on that subject. I am reading from the CBS News translation, which is the most complete English rendering of the statement published by any major American outlet. He said, "Studies have been conducted on opening other fronts in which the enemy has little experience and will be extremely vulnerable in them, and their activation will be carried out if the war situation continues and based on the observance of interests." Iran has war-gamed new theaters of engagement against the United States that it has not yet activated. It believes the United States is operationally inexperienced in these theaters. It believes American assets in these theaters are highly vulnerable. And it is promising to open those theaters if the bombing continues. Now, what asset does the United States have in the region that is simultaneously its most expensive, its most symbolic, its most difficult to replace, its most operationally central to Operation Epic Fury, and the one that Iran has been studying how to threaten for 20 years? It is not a base. It is not a radar installation. It is not a tanker. It is a carrier. Here is the carrier picture as it stands on Sunday, March 15, 2026. Day 15 of Operation Epic Fury. The USS Abraham Lincoln, a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, is operating in the eastern Mediterranean or Persian Gulf area, flying strike missions against Iran as part of the ongoing campaign. The USS Gerald R. Ford, the first of the new Ford-class carriers, the most advanced aircraft carrier ever built, the most expensive warship ever constructed by any navy in the history of human civilization, completed its transit through the Suez Canal this week and is taking up position in the Red Sea. The Gerald R. Ford alone cost $13 billion. Its air wing, the F/A-18 Super Hornets, the EA-18G Growlers, the E-2D Hawkeyes, the MH-60 helicopters, represent several billion more. The destroyers and cruisers and submarines and support vessels of its carrier strike group bring the total hardware value of that single naval formation to something approaching $18 to $20 billion. Two carrier strike groups in the region simultaneously. $39 billion of American naval power, give or take, depending on the specific composition of the escort vessels. And the Gerald R. Ford is in the Red Sea. The Red Sea, which connects to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait at its southern end. The Bab el-Mandeb, which is controlled on its eastern shore by Yemen. Yemen, which is governed, in the areas that matter for missile launch, by the Houthis. The Houthis, who are Iran-backed, Iran-armed, Iran-advised, and who have spent the last 18 months conducting the most intensive sustained missile and drone campaign against naval vessels since World War II. The Houthis, who have already fired on carrier strike groups before, most recently in March 2025, when they launched 18 ballistic and cruise missiles and 1 drone at the Harry S. Truman carrier strike group in the northern Red Sea. The Houthis, who have been conspicuously quiet during the first 2 weeks of Operation Epic Fury, saving their missiles, many analysts believe, for exactly the kind of high-value target that has now just arrived in their operational range. This is where retired Rear Admiral John Kirby's Thursday morning statement becomes the 12 words you need to remember. Kirby, who served as Pentagon press secretary, who knows more about the operational calculus of naval carrier strike groups than most people who will ever appear on morning television, said this on MSNBC's Morning Joe. You can shut down the strait through fear alone. He was talking about the Strait of Hormuz. But the geometry of fear applies everywhere. It applied on February 28th, when not a single tanker transited the Strait of Hormuz in the first 24 hours of the war, before Iran had fired a single drone, before Iran had launched a single missile, before Iran had done anything except exist as a country that had just been bombed. Ships stopped because their captains and their insurers calculated that the risk of being the first vessel to attempt transit in a declared combat zone was not worth whatever cargo they were carrying. Fear shut the strait before a single weapon was fired at a ship. Now apply that same logic to the Red Sea and the carrier question. The USS Gerald R. Ford does not need to be sunk to be rendered operationally ineffective in the Red Sea. It needs to be attacked once, to be successfully struck by a single Houthi missile or a single Iranian-supplied sea drone. And the political, military, and psychological consequences of that attack would be the most significant single event in American military history since September 11th. A carrier is not just a ship. A carrier is the central symbol of American power projection for the last 80 years. It is the vessel that every president since Franklin Roosevelt has pointed to when a crisis erupts and said, "We are sending the carrier." It is the vessel whose presence is supposed to make adversaries recalculate. And Iran knows this. Iran has known this for 20 years. The IRGC conducted its Judgment Day War Games in 2002, in which retired Marine Colonel Paul Van Riper, playing the Iranian commander, sank most of the U.S. carrier group in the Persian Gulf in 72 hours using a combination of small boats, swarming tactics, and coordinated missile strikes. And the Pentagon was so alarmed by the results that it stopped the exercise, reset the battlefield, and changed the rules to ensure Van Riper could not win again. Van Riper, in protest, resigned from the exercise. The vulnerability was real in 2002. It is more real in 2026, after 24 years in which Iran has specifically engineered its military doctrine, its weapons systems, its drone fleets, and its proxy network around the problem of how to threaten an American carrier without being destroyed before the attempt. Now add Mojtaba's other fronts language to this geometry. What fronts does Iran have available that the United States has, as he put it, little experience with, and will be extremely vulnerable in? The Red Sea is the answer that every analyst reached first. The Houthis have not fired at coalition vessels in 2 weeks. Not because they cannot, because they have been saving. Because someone, and we do not know whether that someone is Mojtaba Khamenei in a hospital room in Tehran, or an IRGC commander operating on pre-issued orders, or a combination of both, has decided that the strategic moment for the Houthi escalation has not yet arrived. The Houthis fired on the Harry S. Truman Strike Group in March 2025 with 18 missiles and a drone and did not score a hit. Their missile inventory has grown since then. Their accuracy has improved since then. And the Iranian Foreign Ministry made a public statement this week that every naval analyst read as a barely coded threat. The Iranian military, it said, would welcome the U.S. Navy attempting to escort oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. Welcome. The specific word choice is telling. We welcome you to bring your warships into a narrow 21-mile channel we have mined and equipped with coastal missile batteries and swarm drone launch platforms, in waters where your destroyers cannot maneuver freely and your carrier air power cannot suppress every launch site simultaneously. We welcome the opportunity. The War Zone, the specialist military publication that tracks these deployments more closely than any general audience outlet, reported Thursday that the difficulty in protecting tankers in the strait lies in the narrowness of the waterway, and that it gives vessels little wiggle room to avoid Iranian-placed mines or missiles and rockets launched from the banks. Their senior analyst was direct about the operational constraint. There are not enough Navy assets in the region to simultaneously escort commercial shipping, continue bombing Iran, protect American bases across 7 countries, and defend the carrier strike groups against a sustained Houthi missile campaign in the Red Sea. These missions compete with each other for the same interceptor missiles, the same destroyer escorts, the same aircraft sorties, the same operational bandwidth. Something has to give. The 15-day cost of that bandwidth problem is now documented, and the number is astonishing even by the standards of the most expensive military operation in American history. The Pentagon told Congress in a closed briefing this week that the first 6 days of Operation Epic Fury cost $11.3 billion. 6 days. The Center for Strategic and International Studies modeled the first 100 hours at $3.7 billion. The Iran War Cost Tracker, which aggregates publicly available data, passed $17 billion on Thursday. That is the cost of 15 days of the most intensive sustained bombing campaign in the history of American air power, against a country that still, at day 15, is firing missiles at Israel, striking tankers in the Persian Gulf, has its supreme leader promising revenge from an undisclosed location, and has explicitly told every country that approached it asking for a ceasefire that security will be for everyone or for no one. The economic cascade from those 15 days has reached countries that never chose to be involved. Bangladesh turned off its decorative lights to conserve fuel. Pakistan deployed its own navy to escort its commercial ships. India's cooking gas is running short. The International Energy Agency released 400 million barrels from global strategic reserves in the largest coordinated draw in the agency's history. Oil is above $95 a barrel. The national gas average in the United States hit $3.54 on Thursday. And the 12-hour ultimatum in this script's title, the time frame inside which multiple countries, per the Lebanese Al Akhbar newspaper, approached Tehran and were rejected, is not 12 hours that Iran gave to the United States. It is 12 hours inside which the world's most urgent diplomatic attempts to reopen the Strait of Hormuz were rebuffed by a government that is now officially governed by a man nobody has seen, whose words are read by a news anchor, whose photograph is from several years ago, and who says he will activate new fronts against assets where America is extremely vulnerable if the bombing continues. The question that should be keeping every defense planner in Washington awake tonight is not whether the United States can destroy Iran's military. It has largely done that. 6,000 targets struck in 15 days. The Iranian Air Force is gone. The Iranian Navy is decimated. The ballistic missile arsenal is degraded. These are the stated objectives of Operation Epic Fury, and they are being achieved in the air and on the surface. The question is whether Iran needs its military to achieve its war aim. And Iran's war aim, stated explicitly, consistently, by every official from Mojtaba Khamenei to the foreign minister to the IRGC naval commander to the parliamentary speaker, is not to defeat the United States militarily. It is to impose economic and political costs on the United States sufficient to make the U.S.-Israeli bombing stop. The Strait of Hormuz closure is doing that. Gas at $3.54 and rising is doing that. Stocks down, Dow futures negative, IMF warning of global inflation, the Senate Minority Leader calling for the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, Lisa Murkowski asking whether anyone gamed this out. All of it is doing that. Iran does not need to sink the Gerald R. Ford to make its point. It needs only to fire one missile at it and miss. One missile at the most advanced warship ever built that is taken seriously enough by the U.S. Navy to require evasive action. One moment where an American carrier strike group turns to avoid a Houthi missile in the Red Sea, the way the Truman had to in March 2025, and lost an F-A-18 off its flight deck in the process. And the symbolism of American carrier power is permanently altered in a way that no press release can undo. Here is what the military geometry looks like from the perspective of the IRGC planners who have been studying this for 2 decades. You have a Gerald R. Ford in the Red Sea. You have a Houthi missile force that has been resting for 2 weeks and is Iran-supplied and Iran-advised. You have a Strait of Hormuz that is functionally closed and generating political pressure on the American president every hour that it stays closed. You have a supreme leader whose first public words include a specific promise to activate new fronts where the enemy has little experience and is extremely vulnerable. You have an American Energy Secretary who told the market on Tuesday that the Navy had escorted a tanker through the strait, then deleted the post, and then the White House said it didn't happen. You have an interceptor stockpile across the Gulf states that has been expended at an unsustainable rate for 15 days. You have a U.S. military that is simultaneously trying to bomb Iran, protect 7 countries' worth of American bases, clear the strait, escort tankers, and defend 2 carrier strike groups. And you have a retired rear admiral on morning television saying you can shut down the strait through fear alone before a single weapon is fired. The Iranian military's public statement this week that they would welcome the United States escorting ships through the strait is the most precisely calibrated threat issued by any party in this conflict. It is not a threat to attack the Navy. It is a statement of confidence. It is a regime saying, "Bring your carriers here. We have studied this. We have built for this. We have distributed our launch capability across coastal batteries, small boats, submarine-launched torpedoes, sea mines, unmanned surface vehicles, and proxy forces in Yemen, who have 18 months of operational data against carrier strike groups. We welcome the opportunity to demonstrate the limits of your power in the only theater where your most expensive symbol is simultaneously most vulnerable and most exposed." The USS Gerald R. Ford costs $13 billion. The cruise missile that Iran fired at the Safe Sea Vishnu last week, according to the former U.S. Navy officer who identified it for CBS News, confirmed, is a C-802 Noor. It costs approximately $200,000. The cost ratio between the weapon and the target is not 60,000 to 1, which is the Shahed against radar ratio we explored earlier in this series. It is 65,000 to 1. 65,000 C-802 Noor missiles, or the much cheaper Houthi launch systems that have already been fired at carrier groups, for every Gerald R. Ford. Iran has more than 65,000 of them. The question is not the ratio. The question is whether one of them finds its target on a day when the intercept chain has a gap, when the escort destroyer is reloading, when the carrier is turning into the wind to recover aircraft and cannot maneuver freely. The statement attributed to Mojtaba Khamenei was read by an anchor on state television on Thursday morning in Tehran. No video, no audio, no appearance. The anchor read, "Studies have been conducted on opening other fronts in which the enemy has little experience and will be extremely vulnerable in them." The USS Gerald R. Ford is currently in the Red Sea. On the eastern shore of that sea, in the mountains of Yemen, the Houthis have been quiet for 2 weeks. Quiet in the specific way that things are quiet before they are not. This is day 15. The statement was the ultimatum. The 12 hours it gave were diplomatic. The fronts it promised were military. And the fleet it is describing is $39 billion of the most powerful naval hardware ever assembled, positioned exactly where Iran spent 20 years planning for it to be. The anchor finished reading. She put down the paper. The photograph of a man nobody has seen in 15 days remained on the screen. Then the broadcast ended. The war continued.